Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. Normally, this is a show where we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things that we like and what the movie does well. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is a bonus episode that we like to call Best of the Best. And today we're talking about the brand new film, Deadpool and Wolverine. Andrew, at the time of this recording, it is Saturday morning, opening weekend. My first question for you is, how you doing, man? Good. My second question is, how many times have you seen this film?
Twice,
both on
Thursday.
Is this because you were that insanely hyped about it, or you had like different groups of people to go with?
Well, AMC was doing like an early fan event screening, and I kind of like going to those if I can. It was at like 3 o'clock, and so I went, and all I got was a dumb keychain. It was really not worth it.
You didn't get a Wolverine popcorn bucket with an extremely large mouth?
Look, some things are better left off the pot. No, I had zero desire to acquire that. I appreciate the joke. A lot of these popcorn buckets they put out there, I'm just like, this is weird. It's
and they look to hold very little popcorn.
Well, like 1 year they did like a Ghostbusters one that was shaped like the Ecto-1, and like the top came off, and I was like, this is gonna hold like 2 handfuls of popcorn. Like
exactly.
Like I got this Ghostbusters one from the last one, and it's cool. Don't get me wrong.
That is pretty cool.
This is where the popcorn goes. You can't see it, viewers.
Listeners can't see it.
But like, all it does is popcorn goes in this like purple thing, and I'm like, that's not a lot of popcorn. So
yeah, I need a bucket. I need a large bag that gets soaked on the bottom. I need to feel bad about myself when I reach the end.
Where is my bag? Like, give me the exclusive like reusable popcorn bag for Wolverine and Deadpool. There we go.
Yes.
No, anyway, saw it twice. So I was seeing it with my friends at like 7:30. We went to an Alamo-esque theater down in Naperville, a little suburb here, called the Hollywood Palms, and we had that was like a good 6 or 7 of us. But then I saw it at like 3 o'clock at AMC just because I was like, we'll go to the fan event screening, see what we get. And I got a dumb keychain. And it wasn't even like the cool like best friends keychain of like the heart with like the Deadpool side. It was just a Deadpool keychain, and I'm like, this is dumb.
Is it Deadpool and Wolverine, or literally just Deadpool? So it's not even related to this movie specifically?
No, probably not.
Awesome. Well, a few disclaimers before you get too far. First off, we're going to be spoiling this movie, so if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go see it, and then continue listening, unless you're just a psycho and want to hear all the spoilers. Also, these bonus episodes are unedited, which means we might say some bad words. Normally, we censor those things out. They won't be censored here. You also might hear me cough because I am sick, but I won't be editing those out. So hopefully I don't get a coughing fit. Andrew, it's been a long time since we've recorded, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't know. A lot of stuff has happened. A hurricane blew through here. You came to Houston. We got to hang out. I went on a vacation, but we don't have time for any of that. We have to talk about this film, and I want to set the stage by asking you, how hyped were you? What was your hype level at leading up to the release day of this movie? What do you think about the previous Deadpool movies? How are you feeling about the MCU? How jacked were you? How Hugh jacked were you to see this thing?
I mean, decently. I wouldn't say I'm quite at like, Infinity War Endgame levels of hype or anything like that. But obviously, I think the first Deadpool movie I think is great. The second one I think is good. I like them both. But I was mostly, I think, the curiosity of how exactly we're going to fold these Fox X-Men characters into the MCU. I think that was definitely something that was intriguing and added to my hype specifically just to be like, okay, how's this going to go? What's this going to be like? And so I was decently hyped. And then obviously Feige had come out recently and was kind of really hyping this one up as like potentially being pretty important. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But they were saying all the right stuff, getting me interested, getting me ready to go, and I was pretty curious to see what we were going to see here.
I was excited for it, maybe even a little less than you. I always doubt Deadpool, and I don't know what the deal is. Like, I mean, I loved that first movie like everyone else, and then the longer I sit with them and reflect on them, and I haven't watched them in a while, both the first and the second, I'm like, I don't know, is it that funny, or is it like a shock factor the first time you watch it, and then you revisit it, and all the jokes are dull? But every time I rewatch those movies, I have a blast, and I wonder why I doubt myself. But still, we're going into Deadpool and Wolverine, and I'm like, I don't know, like juvenile humor, does it really hit? You know, I'm doubting Deadpool, which is an absolute mistake because it always hits. And I'll say it here up front. Obviously, I just saw this movie last night. I'm still riding the hype. I feel like it's easily the best of the three, but we can maybe circle back to that by the end of this episode. I had some of the most fun I've had in theaters in a very long time. And this is another thing I want to ask before we dive into this is how much of this was spoiled for you? I only watched the Super Bowl ad, which doesn't spoil much. It's when, you know, we officially see Wolverine in a suit in a not leaked photo. It revealed the title, which I love that this is called Deadpool and Wolverine. So cool. And I don't think anything else was leaked there. I think I maybe saw one other like TV spot, but the only thing spoiled for me there was the Ant-Man suit and the joke about Paul Rudd finally aging. But as far as the cast, I heard the Electra rumor a long time ago and thought that was kind of weird. That's the only person I knew would be showing up. But Andrew, going in, how much of it was preserved for you?
I just go to the movies too much, so it's almost impossible to avoid trailers because I don't run to the hills screaming every time a Marvel trailer comes on like you do. But
I scrolled through the Wikipedia, and I was shocked to see how many of these characters they showed in the trailer.
Yeah, so like I mean, Jennifer Gardner, like that went in the trades that she was coming back. Like, so that one I'd heard about a while back that she was going to be in it. Most of the X-Men like villains that are working for Cassandra Nova, most of them showed up in various versions of the trailers. A lot of those were out there, and people were just seeing them. They're like, "Well, shit, that looks like Ray Park." Oh, sorry, I swore. Should we just swear?
Unedited, baby. Just
all
yeah,
right, cool.
Go with it.
Swearing. So like people saw Ray Park. People were like, "That looks like Lady Deathstrike," and it actually was Kelly Hu that we found out later. You don't even see her close up. Like you don't even
Wait,
see
it
her.
is Kelly Hu?
It is Kelly Hu.
I can't find that confirmed anywhere online. That is Kelly Hu?
I think it's in the credits.
Interesting.
Anyway, so you've got a lot of people that are like blink and you miss it almost things, and like Tyler Mane is Sabretooth, back stuff like that. So a lot of the X-Men villains that are all in that sequence were revealed. Jennifer Gardner I'd heard about in the trades. Unfortunately for anyone who watches trailers, the final Deadpool Wolverine trailer did just straight up spoil X-23. Like,
man,
just full on showed her. Like, and I was just like, and then somebody asked Kevin Feige, they were like, why give that up so close to the release? And apparently it's because Daphne Keane really wanted to go to the premiere. And so they didn't want her presence at the premiere potentially spoiling it. And I was like, yeah, but like, it's not weird that she'd be at the premiere of a movie that Wolverine is in after being in Logan. Like, it's not 100%. That strange. Like, it was, and it may just be lip service. I don't know. So that did get revealed. But like, almost every other big thing, I didn't have any idea. There's 4 big ones that I truly, honestly had no idea.
Man, I can't wait.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into it, Andrew. We're going to start with the cast, but I think it would be a disservice to go through the entire cast like we typically do.
Yeah.
Let's just jump into Mark Strong Awards, though. I'm very curious where you're going with this. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Deadpool and Wolverine?
Oh, man. This is a tough one. Because...
May I just ask, is it a toss-up between the two titular characters?
Yeah, largely. There are some other interesting performances here that I do like, but I don't know though. The villain's pretty great too. And
I think I've been struggling with this, but I think I settled on mine. If you would like me to go first,
yeah, go first.
All right. It's Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. He will be getting yet another Mark Strong Award for playing this character. I know we did it at least once before. He might be a 3-time Mark Strong Award winner. I don't know. We've talked about him a lot. we've talked about a lot of the Fox superhero verse a lot on our show by the nature of, what we do here.
What it
so
is, yeah.
This movie feels like a sequel to our podcast in a lot of ways, because it's like that montage in the end credits, not to jump way too far ahead, but it feels like it's celebrating the best of a failed superhero universe, which is kind of what we do. But I digress. Andrew, the reason I'm going Hugh Jackman is because God, this movie is so ridiculous. Right? We know like the sense of humor, the absurdity, fourth wall breaking, you name it, bouncing off the walls. Hugh Jackman can hang in there like with the comedy stuff, even though his character is always stoic and serious. But then you can have a scene, I won't name any specifics, but he will just retreat down inside of himself, tears well up in his eyes, and you buy it 1,000% in the middle of this movie. Yeah. In this movie, I'm still getting caught up in the trauma of Logan. And it's like a magic trick, this man's ability to turn that on again in this movie. So solely for Hugh Jackman's ability to cut right through all that and make me feel something in the middle of something so absurd, I have to give them the Mark Strong Award. It's giving this movie this like real emotion to touch on, and other characters are able to do it at times too, but no one does it like Hugh Jackman. So for that reason, getting my Mark Strong Award.
I think I have to agree. Like you're hitting all the points. Like to come into something like this and be able to hold his own, but also still ratchet up the emotion and still make you believe in what's happening, while also technically being a completely different version of the character. Like it's it's not an easy thing to do, and it shows that Jackman, even in a movie like this, like a Deadpool Wolverine movie, or basically a Deadpool movie, because that's essentially what this is, he's still not just going to be phone it in. He's still going to do the work. He's still going to bring it in. And I think in that regard, it's tough to not just go straight to the top or second from the top.
Look,
we're Deadpool and Wolverine, so he's second from the top.
I get it. We're unedited here. I'm not going to fix this, but every episode we recognize one person and go so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize them by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Just in case this is your first episode and you don't know what a Mark Strong Award is, I got to make sure that I do explain that in there somewhere. All right, we are going to talk about at least one more performance before we dive into scenes. We got to talk about Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, who I was also, of course, strongly considering for the Mark Strong Award because he's at the center of this whole thing. He holds it together. I don't think it'd be wild to pick him as the best performance. He's easy to take for granted because we've seen this performance a number of times now, and there's really a thin line between Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool anyway, so we know he can turn on this sarcastic charm. It's what he's made an entire career out of, but damn it, he's so good at it. And I don't want to get, too comfortable just expecting this from him. And it is, I think, deceptively hard to have this juvenile sense of humor that also has a bit of a wit to it. There's a great joke about that very thing in one of these scenes that I'll get to, but it's a fine line to walk to like be an annoying character, but not annoy the audience, but annoy the characters in the movie, but make fourth wall jokes, but not be nothing but meta jokes. And the story you're telling still has to work, even though you're hopping out of the story to adjust the audience and make jokes. Like, it's insane that they manage to pull this off every single time, but they do, and you've got to give so much credit to Ryan Reynolds, not only for portraying this character, but being the whole shepherd of this entire franchise, and executive producer and co-writer. I really can't give him any more credit than that. And last thing I'll say is I'm always wondering in Deadpool movies if that's actually Ryan Reynolds on set, because he's covered head to toe, so easy, and I'm sure he has stuntmen, but he could probably knock these things out with 5 days of work if you really wanted to, and just voice over the Deadpool stuff. To my knowledge, He does not do that. He's actually showing up in the suit. So respect to committing to a character that is covered head to toe.
Yeah, this was we talked about it on like the Stallone Judge Dredd, how like they didn't want to do the hallmark of Judge Dredd because they were like, we don't want to hide Stallone's face this whole movie. But by doing that, you kind of betray this hallmark of the character, and it's kind of this thing. And then obviously when Carl Urban did Dredd later, he wore the helmet the whole time. And then obviously even Hugh Jackman kind of falling into a similar vein of like he's never worn the Wolverine mask because, to quote Nice Pool, points at face. But it's so it's but and it's so interesting where Reynolds starts as this character. The fact that it begins in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which we've talked about, we've discussed before, just the idea that like all of this is birthed from that appearance, which when he's Wade in that one moment, everyone's kind of on board with it. They're like, yep, this is exactly perfect. And then obviously what they did later with, turning him into this weird, insane thing. Yeah, like it's to somehow to go from that, which was considered a low point for almost everybody involved, to this now, which is going to be probably seen by largely by many as one of the better MCU movies of the last several years. It's remarkable, and it shows that he's got a dedication to that character, but also because of that Wolverine Origins, where they were like, now we're not going to put him in the suit. We're not even going to do like the early on Rob Liefeld stuff where Deadpool was basically just Deathstroke. Like, people don't realize that about Deadpool. Like, when Rob Liefeld invents Deadpool, he's not Deadpool like he is now. There's a lot of other
not
writers
even close. Just like
he's basically Deathstroke.
The
like
suit.
That's all he really is.
Exactly.
I mean,
down to his name,
Deadpool,
like it's an
Deathstroke,
intentional.
Like, literally, like it's what it is. Turns out Rob Liefeld just does that a lot.
Turns out.
Now
I really wish we would have seen a Deadpool variant that had Rob Liefeld like shovel-shaped feet with the pointy feet and tons of unnecessary.
Did you see
pouches.
the joke? Did you see the Liefeld joke in this movie?
I don't think I did. What was it, Andrew?
So during the Deadpool Wolverine versus the Deadpools, they get thrown into a shoe store, and it's called Liefeld's Just Feet.
Amazing. Perfect. Rob Liefeld notoriously cannot draw feet. Very funny. He
he avoids drawing feet for some reason. Like there's whole sequences where some character is just standing and there's randomly like rocks in front of their feet or something. Like what? Why?
That's brilliant. There's probably so many jokes that I missed, but so Deadpool, he's just a mercenary. Even like Merc with a mouth, like we think of that now to be like fourth wall breaking, but that was just like an early attempt to give him some kind of personality and wisecracks. So it took a long time to develop a lot of the hallmarks. And what's incredible, you talk about X-Men Origins Wolverine, like that weird attempt to bring him to the big screen is what launches Deadpool, like the megastar A-list comic book character. Because even up until then in the comics, he was a known funny side character. I think maybe Deadpool and Cable had happened by then, so he had some leading titles. But that launches this character into this frenzy of popularity, even leading up to that release of that first movie. Like, you had like a Marvel wide line of variant covers where they threw Deadpool on there. He started getting more of his own titles and specials and spinoffs. Like, it's so bizarre that this weird, not at all comic book accurate adaptation of the character led to this renaissance and blossoming, not even a renaissance because he's never been bigger, this blossoming of this character, this now comic book accurate version of the character. It's like seeing this version that was a few degrees off made everyone clamor for like the real deal. I don't know if there's really anything like that, where like a objectively bad adaptation leads to the thing becoming more popular than ever. You know what I mean?
And still maintaining the same actor, no less. Like it's
right.
Like normally it's like, oh, well, we messed it up, we're just going to reboot it later. Like that's your common strategy of like, oh, well, we screwed it up, we'll do it better next time. And in this case, it was Ryan Reynolds apparently just admitted that he was behind leaking that original test footage, which of course he was. Like, I don't know why that's a shock to people, but even that part of the story of just like they had this story that they wanted to tell, and Fox basically was like, nah. And so they leaked the test footage, and it's so popular, it forces Fox to basically be like, fine, go make your Deadpool movie. And then now Deadpool is so successful, it's been brought into the MCU. There's a willpower and a dedication to the character and the story that I think is deeply laudable for how much Ryan Reynolds is dedicated to this character. And people can say that the humor is not for them. They can say that they're not particularly fans of like Ryan Reynolds or that style of humor or whatever. But the fact that he's taken it from Wolverine Origins to now 15 years later into the MCU, I'm like, I mean, come on. Like, it doesn't get much better than that, guys.
It's pretty wild. Let's jump into these scenes. There's so much I want to talk about, Andrew, and we'll just do what we always do. Let's just jump straight to the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, let me ask you, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Deadpool and Wolverine?
I don't know, man. The whole thing.
It is. It is hard to pick.
It's I truly, honestly, like, I'm just gonna pick the one that like immediately came to mind. And there's a whole lot of scenes to talk about, like the emotional beat we talked about with Logan. That's certainly something you could talk about. But I think I have to go with the intro credits where he uses Logan's desecrated corpse to fight the TVA while dancing around to NSYNC and doing the dance, no less. It's like you're talking about Reynolds being in the costume. I like to believe that despite the fact he was in the costume, Ryan Reynolds learned that whole dance. I like to think that. But that was one of my, like, I love that they started the movie off that way. Like, they just straight up were like, you're going to say this is desecrating to Logan, or how can we do this without desecrating Logan? And the answer is, we're not. And he literally digs up the exhumed corpse of Wolverine from the movie Logan and literally uses the adamantium bones of his body to fight off like 30 TVA agents while dancing around to NSYNC. And I was like, we're here. Like, this is it.
It's
like,
beautiful. Like, yes, the Wolverine we get is a different version, but they make it very clear this is the body of Logan that we saw in Logan that he's digging up. Beautiful. I mean, I'm too close to it to call right now, but is this the best opening credits of a Deadpool movie? All three have been absolutely fantastic. I did miss I don't think this one had any jokes in the credits. Like, I think it's the first one that says a gratuitous all CG character, or maybe it's the second one. Directed by some asshole and stuff like that. I didn't see any of those, but regardless, this sequence was just absolutely beautiful, and it works on. It's hilarious. It's obscene. It's a genuinely fun action fight scene, and I think it's inadvertently sort of making a statement about tarnishing media. Like, it addresses, how are we gonna do this without tarnishing the legacy of Logan? We're not, but like, they can do this, but the movie Logan still exists. And if you go and watch it, it's going to be just as impactful as it's ever been. And will still be a beautiful end to that character. But you can also do this, and that doesn't take it away. People make that argument so many times with like sequels.
I've said
and
that
stuff,
endlessly.
and
I have said this endlessly. I'm pretty sure we've had discussions about this on the show where people will talk about they're going to make a sequel to this great thing. And they're like, oh, well, it's going to tarnish the legacy of the original. And it's like, well, no. Like, the go-to I always say is, like, does the presence of Psycho 2 take away the impact and legacy of the original Psycho? And the answer is no. Now, as I've also said, Psycho 2, underrated as hell. Like, should a 20-year later sequel to Psycho work? No. But does it? Yes. I don't know how, but it does.
I think the favorite version of that you've used on the podcast is people concerned about this Crow remake. And
as if there aren't already 3 terrible sequels.
Yes.
Yeah. So like,
but this might be my new favorite example, though. Like, Deadpool murders a group of people with the exhumed corpse of Wolverine, but Logan is still as impactful as it's ever been.
Yep. And it's always going to be. And it's... And I know James Mangold made some kind of comment when this was first announced, and it seemed like he was throwing some shade at it, and then ultimately he was kind of like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. Like, it's whatever. But, and the variance gives you the option. But I love that the movie doesn't shy away from Logan, because, like, there was a lot of people that were like, they're just not going to touch it. Like, I don't think they're not even going to bother trying to mess with that. And I love that they addressed it head on. I love that they made a whole big joke about it. Because the whole premise is Deadpool is like, there's no way he's actually dead. Basically, I don't know why Deadpool thinks Wolverine's just chilling in a dirt sauna under the ground, but apparently he does. And then ultimately, it's revealed, no, he's dead, very dead. And then Deadpool gets to use all of the adamantium bones of his body to have some fun. And it's just a blast. That was our first scene, because if you watch the trailers, you knew what the setup was basically. And I was just like, heck yeah.
Yeah. What a great way to start it off. For my favorite scene, it's hard to choose between all these action scenes and funny scenes. I'm just going to cut right to an emotional scene and a big reason why Hugh Jackman's getting my Mark Strong Award. Just like the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, I got to go with the fireside emotional scene between X-23 and Logan, who is not her Logan, but she obviously feels something for this man. She understands that there's a commonality between all Logans, and she's able to get through to him just a little bit, and he is very adamant that he's not a good man. There's nothing good inside of him. He's finally able to say out loud what his trauma was in his universe, which is he was not around for the X-Men. Humans came and killed them all, and he was too busy getting drunk at a bar. And in his rage, he went on a killing spree, killing those responsible and more, turning the entire world against mutants and just damning everyone. It's very similar to Professor X in Logan. Of similar trauma, being responsible for the death of the entire team. And it's brutal. I think it's... this movie's full of fan service.
Yeah.
I consider it in a good way. I'm impressed there's no quick montages or flashbacks to show us this team getting killed. They could throw in some more cameos here. They could show us some more comic accurate costumes from their world or whatever, but they just let Hugh Jackman carry it. They just let him tell the story with those tears in his eyes that don't quite drip down his face. He's so good at it, and it's so effective, and it's insane that I feel so strongly in the middle of this movie. And a common complaint about a lot of Marvel films, and I've made this complaint about certain entries as well, is they will have their emotional beats and then undercut them with a joke to not let you feel too heavy. And if any movie was going to do it, you would expect this one to do it. You would expect Ryan Reynolds to pop up, or Deadpool to walk in, or someone to make a joke, and that doesn't happen. The scene plays 100% genuine, beginning to end. You have this incredible moment between these, a grown-up X-23, which never thought I would see, between her and Logan. And Andrew, I don't have the cast in front of me. What is this young actor's name that plays Laura?
It's Daphne Keane.
Daphne Keane. So great to see her back in the role. We'll talk about it some more. But her and Hugh Jackman sitting by a fire, having an emotional heart-to-heart, it is wonderful. It feels like an epilogue to Logan in a lot of ways, which, again, absurd that's happening in this, of all movies.
This movie is interesting because we'll keep talking about scenes, and we're going to talk about some of the cameos too, but it basically is like simultaneously bringing Deadpool into the MCU, but it's also essentially this giant love letter to the Foxverse.
Yes.
And the high points of it. And I mean, I struggle to say that the Foxverse was a failure simply because this movie exists. And and I don't know, I'm not going to go to bat for all of them. We talked about most of the Foxverse at this point. But
yeah.
The very fact that this movie exists and is a thing that people are excited about, just that little thing tells me that it wasn't a failure. Maybe it wasn't all good. We know it wasn't all good. And maybe there's things that we wish they'd done differently. There are. But the fact that this movie exists and people are hyped for it and people are excited about the people that show up in it is all I need to know to say that the Foxverse wasn't a failure. Because the only reason something like the MCU even exists is because of that Foxverse. X-Men, it's the 1-2 punch of X-Men, Spider-Man. We've talked about that before. But X-Men and another previous movie that we'll talk about in a minute too are why these movies exist now. And this movie embraces that, it celebrates it, and that montage at the end is set to that song that was everybody's high school graduation song in the 2000s.
Yeah,
all of that
I think it was mine, to be honest with you.
I'm absolutely certain it was mine.
Fantastic. Andrew, we've got to start getting to some of the cast that's in this movie so we can quit talking around stuff. Where to start? Let's start with Deadpool and Wolverine.
We got Deadpool, Wolverine, but I was going to say Jennifer Gardner is obviously here as Elektra. That one I knew about.
Well, let's go to that scene. Let's go to that scene, okay? So Deadpool and Wolverine have a knockout, drag-out fight in a car. They get abducted by an unseen person, taken to headquarters, which, friend of the show, my wife, was freaking out at these headquarters because it's like the statue that Wanda is in at the end of Multiverse, I think. I don't know. It's related to Wanda
a statue. There's a statue on the ceiling that's just Scarlet Witch.
Okay, but she saw Scarlet Witch, freaked out, but she does not end up appearing in this movie. But very cool. So they come to in this little hideaway hut, and the fact that this movie does slow motion entrances for all these characters, like it knows how fucking awesome this is. We get the slow motion entrance of Jennifer Garner walking in as Elektra, the one that most of us knew about already. Dude, first off, she looks great. I mean, I don't even mean that in like a creepy way. I mean, like, she could play Elektra today. She looks so good. And
Chris, I don't mean to be pedantic. She did play Elektra today.
Honestly, you got me there. Okay. I think you know what I meant, but she still looks great as the character. So she walks in, and it's like the crowd, the theater I saw it in, cheers, clapping. What's amazing about that is most people don't hold Daredevil in high regard. Most people didn't see Elektra. We covered both of those movies on our podcast. There's stuff to like about them, but they're not high points of the genre. But we loved seeing this character back because it's so cool. And I think maybe one of the biggest takeaways from this whole movie is like, man, Foxverse had its problems, but casting, it was pretty spot on throughout.
No.
So she walks in, and it's great. She mentions there's going to be 4 of them. We get another slow motion entrance, and Andrew, fucking Wesley Snipes walks in as Blade, and
holy hell!
Like, I almost gave him the Mark Strong Award right there. I sincerely considered him
so cool.
So cool. He's like an older Blade. He's got the gray hair. He's just as badass as ever. I had no idea. Was not on my radar. I would have guessed 10 other characters and returns before I guessed Wesley Snipes was in this movie.
Zero clue. I had not even heard this rumored. I avoided like the Marvel spoiler subreddit. I avoided almost all my normal outlets where people talk about this stuff. And I had heard some weird rumors that didn't come out to like the Taylor Swift as like Dazzler. And I was like, look, if Taylor Swift's going to show up in a movie, it ain't going to be as frickin' Dazzler. No disrespect, but it's something where I just genuinely like when Wesley Snipes appeared, like my brain had to process it for a second, and I was like, Wesley Snipes, noted Ryan Reynolds hater, Wesley Snipes is in this movie. I I couldn't believe it. I was genuinely like, now that is admittedly not a Fox thing. But
It's not Fox, it's not X-Men. Like, that's probably why it wasn't on my radar.
Well, it wasn't on my radar, but also you'll notice Blade is not part of the montage at the end because technically, the Blade movie is owned by Warner Brothers because it was made by New Line Cinema, which is now owned by Warner Brothers. But there's nothing saying they can't just have Wesley Snipes appear as Blade. Like, they can do that. And so that one, I think, is just mostly just a wink nod at Ryan Reynolds being in Blade Trinity. And obviously the supposed friction that the characters had with each other, and then the real friction that the actors had with each other. And just, yeah, when Wesley Snipes walked out, I was like, all bets are off at this point. I got no clue what's happening. Which, to be fair, there was an earlier cameo that already did that. So, the two earlier cameos that already did that. We'll already go there. Yeah, Wesley Snipes as Blade. I was like, that's unbelievable.
They do make a nod to that. They say, like, I can't believe we actually get to make a movie again together or something like that. They make some kind of comment to each other. I think Deadpool says, I didn't think we'd ever get to work again together. Something like that. They acknowledge the conflict that they had on the set. But just like you, after the scene, which there's more to get to, I was like, there's no rules. There's anything can happen. Which, what a refreshing feeling to feel in theaters, in an MCU movie. Like, it's just, they can do anything except snort cocaine, apparently.
They can talk about it. They just can't do it.
Talk about it incessantly. All right. So then the next person walks in. The first thing we see is a playing card flying through the air. And I immediately, listen, I'm Gambit fan number one. I love this character. I love this guy. I have his first appearance signed by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee hanging on my wall. Unabashed Gambit stan. And I'm thinking, cool, Taylor Kitsch. Like, we'll get to see him again. They'll give him some cool scenes or whatever. But Andrew Gambit is played by Channing Tatum.
Yes, he is.
This is the most inside baseball casting. I don't know how widespread it's known that Channing Tatum was really pushing to play Gambit. Fox had a Gambit solo movie set up with Channing Tatum that just was stuck in production hell forever and was ultimately canned whenever Disney bought it, and it's never going to happen. But he pushed for it for a long, long, long time. And nerds like us are going to know that. I don't know how this lands. This might seem very random for people that don't know that, but we get Gambit in like full comic book accurate costume. I mean, the collar on his trench coat pops up in the back. Like, it is every detail. He's got this stupid headpiece that Gambit wears that I don't even understand what it is. Is it armor? Is it leather? It's uncomfortable. How does he hear? I don't know, but my reaction to this one, if Blade was like, fuck yeah, this is amazing, this was like, this is hilarious. Like, I thought it was just very funny to see Channing Tatum as Gambit. And then the first time he talks, he does comic accurate gumbo Cajun. And I laughed because I thought it was hilarious. But he sticks with it the entire performance. Like that, the movie is almost saying like, oh, you want comic book accurate characters? This is what it looks like. Fair. This is how they look. This is how they sound. It's kind of funny and kind of badass at times. Look, I don't think the Gambit movie would have ever been good. Like, I love Gambit. I think he's the wrong choice to star in a solo movie. But I want to see him as a supporting character. We get that here. We get some amazing action scenes. I don't know if Channing Tatum even sold me that he's the best person to ever play Gambit, but I've got no complaints about this. It was funny. It was cool. The accent is ridiculous, but pretty good considering how the character is
your
written.
Dialect coach?
Yeah, the Minions. It was man, it was good. These three people walking into the movie. Yeah, I threw my hands up. I was like, there are no rules. I did start to think, maybe I'll circle back to this later. I started to think like who else could appear, and I dreamed up a few people that I would like to see. I'll come back to that because I didn't get all of them. But Andrew, what'd you think of Channing Tatum as Gambit?
I thought it was hilarious because, like, obviously I knew I followed that story because originally it was that he was going to show up in Days of Future Past as Gambit, and then that was going to like spin off into a solo film, and then that didn't end up happening. And then at one point, like like Chris Claremont wrote like a treatment that a guy turned into a script, and then Rupert Wyatt was going to be the director, and then they even cast like Léa Seydoux as like she was going to play Belladonna Boudreaux, and then Wyatt dropped out, and then Simon Kinberg was going to produce it. He said the script was done, and then Doug Liman of Edge of Tomorrow fame and many other things, who is awesome. Don't get me wrong, like a Doug Liman Gambit movie is not a thing I'm going to bet against. He came on board, and then he was going to oversee some script rights, and then he left because it got delayed. And then 17, they were going to go under further rewrites, because at that point Deadpool and Logan had come out, and they were like, all right, let's kind of retool this a bit. Then Gore Verbinski at one point was going to direct it, and then he left, and then yeah, it was just it was a whole big thing. And then finally after so this is like so to be clear, this is like 5 years of development. It's like 2014 and 2019, and it only really ends because Disney buys Fox. And I basically put a kibosh on it because at the time we assumed they were going to quietly fold the Foxverse, but it keeps persisting. So I thought this was really funny. I thought it was hilarious that they like poked jokes at the fact that he didn't actually exist. He's like, I thought I might have been born in the void. Like,
Yeah.
yes, like just joking that like,
Or he's like,
not...
they called me Gambit. He's like, do they call you that, or you want people to call you that?
Yeah, like, you know, who's they in this scenario? But yeah, I thought it was really fun. Obviously, doing the comic accurate costume. Like I said, how does he put that on? I don't know. It's probably pasted on. But just to see him in the comic accurate costume, to see him be Gambit, to do the accent. Obviously, Ryan Reynolds was having a ton of fun just playing off of Channing Tatum for this. So this is one that's just cool. It's just fun. If you know what the story is, it's great. If not, obviously you can look it up later and find out. I'm sure there's some people who probably had no idea, but at the same time, even if you don't know that story, here's a comic accurate Gambit for you. So yeah, have fun with that. Like,
I think it's likely, like, he gets cool action scenes later. These are the best Gambit on-screen action scenes we'll ever get. I think that's a definite possibility. We'll see what the MCU eventually does with the X-Men, but it was pretty awesome. There's one more character reveal here, which apparently was spoiled in trailers, but I didn't have it spoiled for me. X-23 walks in. She's the fourth one. Laura. I did pause a beat. I'm like, it's the same actor? Because, you know, she's obviously grown a lot, but yeah, it is. She's back. So cool. This one got the smallest reaction at my theater, but maybe because it was spoiled for so many people in the trailer. But I thought it was a great way to cap off this scene. Again, anything is possible. What a team they assembled. And this feels like a good time to say this movie's full of gratuitous cameos. It never... I don't know how they pulled it off. I haven't watched behind the scenes stuff. It feels like they're all on set together. It feels like they filmed it all together. Compared to movies like Spider-Man No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness, where I feel like you can kind of see the seams and a lot of the cameos, like, oh, they're against the green screen in Compton, and these people aren't in the shot together. I didn't feel any of that in this movie. It felt like they got everybody on set. And it felt like there was a lot of location shooting, and again, multiple people on set together. This movie looks great. It feels like they're correcting the ship a little bit versus some of the MCU entries that I maybe got a little carried away with their CG backgrounds. And again, kind of splicing everybody together, which during COVID production, I know was also just a necessity. But this movie looks fantastic. And again, kudos, because if they weren't actually all on set together, they certainly felt and looked like it. Yeah. And, when these people first appear, I'm like, all right, well, these are going to be quick cameos. They have extended action scenes. They have story beats. They appear in multiple scenes. I couldn't believe how much screen time all these characters got.
Me either. I was actually surprised, but then literally they essentially stick with the characters through the big kind of return to their universe. But yeah, so they're all there. They all get big action beats at the big scenes. They all get moments to kind of shine and do their thing. And it was just cool. This is probably the first time anyone was semi-hyped about Jennifer Gardner playing Elektra. Like, this is like,
Yeah.
No offense, but like, I love the gag where they mention Daredevil and they mention Daredevil died, and they're like, "Oh, sorry about that." And Jennifer Gardner's like, "It's okay." But they had a lot of fun with that, and it was. We're not quite on like No Way Home levels of like Garfield and Maguire and how integral they were to that movie once they showed up, but they're in that scene, and then they are major parts of the big action sequence that follows. So pretty cool.
And again, I was expecting. We'll just jump to that action scene real quick, where they all attack Cassandra's hideout. I kept expecting comedic deaths for these characters. They all show up at the action scene, slow motion. They all assemble. It looks badass. Gambit steps forward. I'm like, he's gonna get decapitated. We're gonna have a joke here, and it never happens. There is one joke death. We'll get around to it, but they treat these characters with respect. Oddly, again, it's so weird that we're saying that in this absurd movie, but like the whole point, and the characters say as much, is like our characters, I mean, they're really breaking the fourth wall, that break the fourth wall, deserve a finale, deserve a legacy, deserve to go out on their own terms, deserve an ending, and they get that. And like they kill these characters off of them. I mean, it's very clear at the end that I can't remember the monster's name in the void, but
Goliath.
It's going to wipe them out. After
or
they
does it?
Well, yeah, they can always come back, but it feels like a touching finale. They're going to get one last badass action fight scene to show off their stuff, and then right off into the sunset. And it's so cool that this movie can do that for these characters and these actors.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very cool. It's just because, like you said, who was thinking? Like, I never thought Wesley Snipes would be back as Blade ever.
Never.
Never. I never thought that would happen. And it's so. I have a friend that loves Wesley Snipes' Blade, and I told him after I watched it, I was like, "You need to get off the internet and go watch Deadpool and Wolverine." That's all I told him. I was like, I'm stressing to this man that I want him to see this movie without revealing that there's going to be a cameo in this movie that's going to make him like the happiest man on the planet. Like he has no idea it's there. I can't tell him it's there, but also I'm like, but if you wait too long, you will find out that he's there, and you're going to be sad you didn't see it for yourself. Like, you need to do this. And I can't. He's like, well, I got some stuff coming up, and I'll get to it. I was like, no, you need to go like now. You have to do this. But
Andrew,
and then just
Andrew, you need to watch the episode "One Man's Trash" of the Chris Gethard Show.
There's nothing spoiled in that will be ruined if I don't see it immediately, Chris. These are not comparable situations. Don't do that.
There's a reason I want you specifically to see it.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Also, everyone listening should see One Man's Trash. Look it up on YouTube. Don't get it spoiled for you. It's amazing. One of the best hours of television ever made. Very funny.
An hour? Jesus. No.
It's like 40 minutes because there's no commercials. You'll be fine.
Oh,
boy.
God.
Let's talk about some more cameos. Andrew, there's this scene that I can't believe I didn't see coming, Andrew. They're in the void. They're walking through the desert that is the void. And then someone shows up to assist them, right? And Deadpool's hyping him up. He's like, nerds everywhere. He's their guy. And we see his face. And it's Chris Evans. So we're all happy to see Captain America in this movie. Who thought we would see Chris Evans, Captain America again after Endgame? This is crazy. And then some bad guys show up, and Chris Evans is about to say Avengers Assemble, which doesn't even make any sense that he would say that. But Deadpool's making us believe that's where this is going. And then Chris Evans says, "Flame on," and we realize he's here as Johnny Storm. How did I not know that was coming? Andrew, did you predict this?
I thought it was going to be a fake out, and it was going to be a different Chris as Captain America. That was my first immediate thought. Because they're obviously hyping up, is it who you think it is? And I kind of fell for that originally. And he puts his arm out, and he's got the red kind of on his glove there or whatever. Yeah. So they're clearly going for that sequence. And so but they're hiding his face the whole time. So he jumped down, and I was like, all right, what's going on here? What are we doing? And I thought they were literally going to do something Chris Pine is Captain America in The Void.
The one that's not in the MCU, yeah.
Yeah, the one Chris that's not there, just some other joke like that. And then they finally revealed that it was Chris Evans, and then my brain is still like, he can't just be Captain America, right? It's got to be something. And then like the minute Deadpool it's one of those things that clicked like the moment before he said it. Yeah. Where I was like, what? And then like the minute Deadpool was like, he's going to say the thing, I was like, oh, he's going to say the thing, but it's not the right thing. And then he said that, and I was like, that's awesome. So this is probably the only character that's kind of played as a joke, though, because he doesn't really get an action beat. He kind of gets flamed out by Pyro almost immediately, and then he does stick around longer than I expected. Because I thought he died straight up when he like fell down and landed on his neck. I thought that was it. 100%. I thought he was done. I was like, oh, this guy's done. But he sticks around for a few more scenes and then this is probably like, I don't know if this is the one you were talking about, but this is probably like the joke.
Yes. Like
cameo death that I can think of where like he's just kind of there for one so that you can point and go, oh, it's Chris Evans and he's not doing the thing you expect. We got a couple of funny beats between them. He gives us some good exposition and then ultimately gets his skin ripped off.
And I think it's totally fine to make him a punching bag because he's Captain America. Like he doesn't need redemption as this. He has
an ending already. Like Captain America. It's this one is just for fun. Like if they couldn't have gotten him, you could have put anybody else in this spot and it would have been fine. But because it's Chris Evans, you just get to do something cool.
Yeah, like if it was Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch, I wouldn't expect the joke death and everything. I would think he'd be more in line with Elektra and stuff, giving him a proper send-off or whatever. But given that Chris Evans' career turned out just fine, I think it's the right character to do that with. And so they get surrounded by soldiers of the Void. We see Tyler Mane return as Sabretooth, which I think is so cool. This was my favorite Sabretooth look. You know, Liev Schreiber gets a lot more to do as the character, but I love this more comic weird hair look.
It's comic Sabretooth. Even in the X-Men movie, he's probably the person in that movie that's closest to what he's supposed to be,
Toad is here, although I'm reading it's not Ray Park.
Yeah, I just read that a lot of these blink and you miss it X-Men ones are like there was all stories that they were coming back for it, and I guess that may not be the case.
But cool to see the characters. This is what started the whole like, man, anything is kind of possible feeling is these random characters coming back, and then they hype up a big battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth, which we've seen numerous times.
Well, and that's what was funny. Like, even in the original X-Men, they fight several times. So, like, Deadpool being like, we've waited 20 years for this. You look ridiculous pulling all of his knives out of him. And I'm like, no, we've seen these guys fight. Like, it's definitely happened. Maybe not with Wolverine in the classic suit, but yeah, then he just cuts his head off.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. And then Deadpool like holds up the head and he's like, "Here's your Queen Furiosa." Just some weird like Mad Max-esque speech, and I was like, "Beautiful."
Very good. It was great, but they do get captured by a magnet, taken back to
my only weakness,
Cassandra. So let's talk about Emma Corrin as Cassandra Nova. First off, Cassandra Nova, man, I would not have expected this character. Xavier's twin, she shows up and I'm like, oh, I know this character, and I'm like thinking back to like New X-Men, Grant Morrison, is that where this comes from? Where does this go? And like I was like, okay, I don't need to know all this back. Like, I've read about this character, I know she exists, but let's have the movie tell me like what her purpose is. And she's just an insanely powerful twin of Charles Xavier that doesn't have his moral compass, who is now ruling the Void. She was pruned. I think they make it sound like she's pruned at birth or from the womb because of her powers, but she's pretty much been in the Void her entire existence, ruling things, and she's a scary baddie.
Yeah. So this is a Grant Morrison New X-Men thing. The story is largely the same. I guess in the comics, she's basically conceived without a body. She kind of improvised one by copying Xavier's DNA to make her own body. She tries to kill Charles while they're in the womb. He hits her with a psychic blast, which caused assumptive the child to be a stillbirth. and then eventually she reformulates herself into a body because it's just a thing you can do, I guess.
Because Grant Morrison is a weird dude.
I mean, I'd hardly say that's the strangest thing that X-Men comics have ever done. So, but anyway, story here, largely the same. They were twins. She was in the womb with him. She tried to kill him. They pruned her. She's basically been here her whole life. There's some sort of agreement between her and the TVA that basically she kind of rounds up variants for Eliath to eat or something like that. And they always go out hunting for him. This is also where we get Aaron Stanford returning as Pyro. Probably one of the bigger parts for one of the former actors, or probably, I mean, it's definitely the biggest part for a former villain. Gets plenty of speaking lines, has roles in both, works with the TVA, works with Cassandra Nova, has different plots all around. He shows up in several scenes. So he gets a lot to do there. He gets a cooler, more accurate costume, which he was excited about. And I think that's cool. Just to give that guy, even him from, the original X-Men movies, who kind of never really made his way back to anything. But
I mean, I did read, about the more comic accurate, but is it like Pyro is a very flamboyant character in the comics?
The colors are played down a little bit, but it's there.
Okay. That was
especially compared to what he wore in the other movies.
I mean, he was just a guy with clickies on his hand. Yeah, exactly. Cool to see everybody back. I mean, again, the really just highlighting that like casting was pretty good. If there was issues in those movies, it typically wasn't the actors. So, cool to see like anybody and everybody return. Boy, comic accurate. Let's talk about Hugh Jackman in the blue and yellow suit. Finally, 24 years after, what would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
There it is.
It turns out, this looks so much cooler than the black leather. But I don't know. It's not for me to decide. If the first X-Men movie had costumes like this in the year 2000, would we have been ready for it? Would the movie have been taken seriously? Would it have been as big a success? I don't know. It's hard to say. X-Men might have needed to crawl before we could later run.
I don't know, man. Like, Spider-Man comes out 2 years later, and like there's a Green Goblin costume in that movie that's pretty wild, and nobody had a problem with it, really.
That's you know what? Can't argue.
It's an interesting thing because, I mean, we've talked about this before too, how like X-Men takes that grounded approach, whereas Spider-Man kind of takes that. It's a comic approach, like, and obviously Spider-Man is kind of the thing that leads directly into like the MCU. Like, there's a line from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man to Jon Favreau's Iron Man. God, there's only 6 years between those movies. That's wild. Crazy to think about. It's weird to see how short a time it really was at the end of the day. But they do that, and whereas X-Men is kind of what leads to more of like your Dark Knights and your things like that, where like not necessarily that Christopher Nolan was like, oh, X-Men, I can make a Batman movie like this, but it leads to that thread of like we're gonna do the grounded, more serious takes that are kind of.
If this happened in real life, what would it look like?
Yeah, we're going to run away from the comics a little bit or like try to downplay it. And they make a joke about that here. I think when he shows up, shows up in a suit that shows he's not ashamed to be in a comic book movie. It's good. I like the suit a lot. I like, speaking of Wolverine, he gets a little montage there where we get to see him as several different versions of the character, including one of our other cameos, a very, very small one that was super, super fun. But I love that the first one he goes to, it just looks like Wolverine, and then he stands up and he's like 4 foot tall Wolverine or 5 foot tall Wolverine from the comics.
Comic accurate height Wolverine.
Yeah, it was like beautiful. And like Ryan Reynolds makes a couple of jokes. Short King, comic accurate, you might say. But he runs through a bunch more. We run into like an old man Logan type, one that's just kind of sitting on a porch with a shotgun and shoots Ryan Reynolds. We get Wolverine's first appearance where he's fighting the Hulk. They even do the thing with the claws. Like he does the brown and yellow costume, even though he doesn't wear that when he fights the Hulk. He wears the blue and yellow costume when he fights the Hulk. Because that's Incredible Hulk. 172, something like that.
Man, I don't know. Doesn't he have like whiskers on that costume too?
Yeah, it's really weird. It's the first appearance of Wolverine, and one thing I will say, and I'm going to be, you may. The internet may disagree with me here, but one thing that does drive me nuts is the character of Wolverine has now been modified, and they list Roy Thomas as one of his creators, which is stupid and I hate. Because Roy Thomas didn't create Wolverine. Len Wein, John Romita Sr., and Herb Trimpe did. And I'm not happy about that. Is this like a
Elon Musk as a Tesla founder situation?
It's a recent development. It's something that like Roy Thomas has like recently leveraged for that. Like, oh, I was the editor of that book, so I also created the character. And everyone, like the comics industry at large, was kind of like, what? No, what? But it's a contract now. So like now, anytime Wolverine appears, Roy Thomas contractually gets credited as one of his creators. And I like Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas has written some great comics, but this is just, to me, it's a tremendously douche move. And I don't like it. And most people stand against it. But anyway, it's Incredible Hulk 180, my mistake. And then his full appearances in 181. But that's the cover where like you see the Hulk and like you see Wolverine in his blue and yellow costume, and it's pretty wild. So yeah, they do the brown and yellow costume, which is like, they say John Byrne, but I think that's the Frank Miller costume. I don't remember. But anyway, it was cool to have that little Hulk bit too, where we had Wolverine versus the Hulk. So
yeah,
cool.
It's cool. I did not recognize Wolverine, Henry Cavill, as Wolverine. He turns around, my audience freaks out, and I'm like, who is this guy? That's not Hugh Jackman? Who is it? He's got all this facial hair. Like, literally, the scene ended, and I reckon the joke he said was like, oh, we'll treat you better than the guys down the street. I understand that joke now, but when that scene ended, I leaned over to a friend of the show, my wife, I was like, who was that? She's like, Henry Cavill. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Okay, that's good. Yeah. That explains those massive arms.
The massive arms, and then, of course, obviously, Ryan Reynolds does the whole, like, and can I just say, this feels so right, because that's like a John Krasinski as Reed Richards type thing. It's just a really big fan casting, and it's like 15 seconds. It's literally... I'm sure Henry Cavill is already that jacked normally, didn't have to do anything, just showed up and shot his stuff, and he's good. He's chomping on the cigar, says you were just leaving, working on a motorcycle, chucks him through, throws him across the room. Short, simple, to the point. Though, basically, Johnny Storm really did tell me that like all the rules were off as far as what I was expecting, and then Cavill, I was like, oh, so we're just having fun now. That's fine.
Yeah, and especially in a montage where it's literally just a blink and you miss a cameo.
And then also you see Hugh Jackman as Patch, which is like that's the tuxedo one with the eye patch, and looked pretty cool there too. And like they just really had fun with this little montage and got Jackman to show off a couple of different. Oh, this is where we also see the Age of Apocalypse version, with like the red
beautiful
and black
mane
costume,
of hair,
that beautiful glam rock hair that he's ready to fight with, the whole burning. And then I think it's the cover of X-Men 251.
Where he's like crucified on the X and all the red skulls on
and
the
like
ground.
the red skull. Yeah, I was like, this tone, like it literally, like once Deadpool was like, oh, the tone changed here, whatever. That's literally what I was like saying in my head at the exact moment. Yeah, it's Uncanny X-Men 251, a little issue called Fever Dream. But yeah, the cover is Wolverine on the X cross on a mountain of skulls, and that's like the Reavers have the Reavers have come in and they're basically torturing him, and he's having hallucinations, and he kind of flashes back, and then he flashes forward and everything. It's a weird thing, but just like another cool, like, just straight up homage that we're going to run with. And again, just a couple of minutes, but it was pretty cool.
There's several times in this movie where it's like, all right, let's just pause and give the fans what they want. And Deadpool says as much. I mean, the first time they fight in the void, he looks to the audience, he's like, get your special sock ready. Deadpool and Wolverine are going to fight. And it's awesome. It's got no story purpose. It's just, yeah, we want to see these characters fight. And it's a great fight. I love, I feel like there was a checklist. Like, all right, we can get Hugh Jackman as Wolverine one last time. What do we need to show that we haven't been able to do before? Obviously, comics accurate costume is a big one. All that montage, you're seeing different versions of the character, but I think even in the fight, they got to a few things. The thing where he runs on all fours.
All fours, yep.
Which we saw Sabretooth do. I don't know if we ever saw Hugh Jackman do it. was just so cool and like animalistic and just felt different than what we've seen from Hugh Jackman as the character before. And it's just great seeing two, two immortal characters fight because they can shoot and stab each other nonstop and just keep going. And it's just fun to watch. Like, that's all there's to say about it. And I feel like it's maybe 20 minutes later in the movie where they do it again in the car. They're like, I'm going to fight you. And they just have this huge fight in the car.
It's very interesting because the first, and it's a flip though, and it's interesting because the first fight is very much Wolverine is just going to fight Deadpool because he's like, I don't know who you are. You've got me in this weird situation. I was where I was and you've messed that up. And so we're going to fight. And they do that. That second fight is Deadpool fighting Wolverine because Wolverine has now personally offended Deadpool. And so it's a different fight the second time. It's much more personal, because like the first fight is just basically like gut reaction. I don't know who you are. You've got me in this weird situation. I'm going to fight you now. But that second fight is now like, that's when Wolverine like attacks him personally and is like, how are you going to save a universe? You couldn't even save your relationship with a stripper. And like the minute he said that, I was like, oh no. I was like, that's, and then I love that moment too, because Deadpool doesn't make a joke. He doesn't quip. He just looks right at him and says, I'm going to fight you now. And proceeds to do just that. And you talk about letting the moment breathe. You talk about letting the moment sit. You talk about letting the moment speak for itself. And I thought that was another really great example of restraint. Of being like, you know what? That moment needs to sit. And we're not going to do anything with that. It reminded me a lot of when when Thor cuts off Thanos' head in Endgame. And they're like, what did you do? And he's like, I went for the head. And like, they let it sit. I love that
moment so much. Yeah.
They let it sit. Like, that's, it would have been so easy to just have somebody be like, yeah, you sure did. Like, would have been like so easy for someone to just like undercut that moment. But in that moment of just like, no, I'm going to fight you. And then Wolverine even does kind of chuckle because at this point he doesn't take Deadpool seriously because he's established that. He's like, you're immature, you're stupid, you're dumb, I hate you. And so, but to have Deadpool be the one that's dead serious and doesn't quip and doesn't say anything and then just starts fighting him. And then obviously during the fight, they bring on the Grease song and stuff like that, and they have fun with it at that point. But in that moment, when the fight starts, they let that emotion sit. And I was like, good stuff.
We get introduced to a lot of Deadpool variants.
We do.
Almost all of, I assume all of them appearing in the comics at some point. I recognize most of them. There's been every type of version of Deadpool at some point. Let's talk about Nice Pool, though. This one I didn't recognize. I don't know if this is an original to the movie or not. But it's an unmasked Deadpool. So it's just Ryan Reynolds with long flowing hair being his beautiful self.
Excuse me. Nice Pool is credited as a gentleman named Gordon Reynolds.
Pardon me.
Clearly not the same man.
I
love this character though.
The strong Sulry, the strong Canadian accent.
Yeah, he's got the strong accent. He's got this like weird like 2000s-esque version of a Deadpool costume, like the hard plastic almost. Like it's molded to his body kind of thing. He's got the super long hair, and he's just super nice, and it annoys them. And he's also the keeper of Dogpool.
Excuse me, he's the papa of Dogpool.
Of Dogpool. My mistake. The papa. He's one of those. He's like that guy you meet, and like you spend the entire rest of your life looking for the thing he does badly because you can't believe anybody's this nice. Like that's how this character is. But I love his moment where Deadpool says some fourth wall breaking thing, and he's like, "Oh, I can touch the fourth wall too." And he looks at the camera and goes, "The proposal." And then just looks back, and I was like, "Dude, this."
I love that because.
So
Ryan Reynolds or Deadpool Prime responds by saying, "Is that what you think I do?" Because the quip that Ryan Reynolds has made, or God, that's confusing to say. The quip that Deadpool made was Van Milder. He called him Van Milder, which is clever because it's Ryan Reynolds, but he's like
Van Wilder, the lesser version,
yeah, exactly. So like it's a reference, but also a joke. Whereas all he can do is say the proposal. He can just say a Ryan Reynolds movie, which I think is such good highlighting of like that it actually takes effort to make these reference-based jokes that have become so popular in movies. Like, I've used this, I've probably said this on the pod before, but like, Judd Apatow does a lot of reference-based humor, his movies. And look, it's funny, I get it, but I feel like it's sort of spread to like, I don't know, it's maybe gotten out of hand. And this joke that has always stuck with me that I've always hated was the movie Good Boys, which I like. It was in the trailer, it's in the movie. The kids are riding their bike, and the older neighbor sees them riding them and goes, "Hey, Stranger Things, go fuck yourself." And that's the joke. That's it. That's the whole thing. Like, the kids riding bikes, they call them Stranger Things. And I'm like, there's no joke here. That's not funny. You're just pointing out a commonality. Whereas Van Wilder, again, there's a second layer to it. So it's not enough just to be a reference to be funny, and that's what that joke is saying. So I thought it was very cool to put that in the movie. It works on a lot of levels.
Yeah, like, reference-based humor is always a tough one, just because, like, Family Guy is what it's like. Family Guy, I feel like all it is just reference the show. Yeah. And it's also gotten like super mean-spirited, and it's also kind of mean to disabled people, and there's a whole lot of problems with Family Guy. But it's that idea that like the joke is I made a reference, and it's like, okay, that's not funny. Like, that's the same issue I kind of have with it's not everything Seth MacFarlane does. Like, something like, I know the Orville has a lot of its fans, but
Orville's great. I'm saying it for it.
I know I have personal issues with Seth MacFarlane because of a lot of his comments about disabled people, but it's a lot of just reference this, reference that. Like, a Million Ways to Die in the West is just all Western references. There's nothing else to it. Yeah. And so when you get to a point where you're just like, well, if you strip all this away, what's left? And like, I've seen people say about this movie that once you strip away the references, there's nothing left, and I don't really think that's true. It's not the most complex story, but it's still a story. But yeah, when the joke is just simply that I made a reference with no other context, like you said, like the day Stranger Things go fuck yourself. That's a great example of like, there's no joke here. Like, or the only joke is that I'm being mean about Stranger Things, basically. Like, and yelling at a random person for no reason. Like, what's funny about that?
I agree. This big fight at the end, I called it the 100 Deadpool fight. It's before we move on from Nice Pool, you said you want to find the one thing they're not good at. What he's not good at is regenerating. He's the one Deadpool that can't regenerate, so Deadpool uses him as a human shield to get across the alley, which there's no reason for them to get across the alley. He just wants him to die so he can take his guns.
It's like there's a donut thing, and he's like, they're basically hospitals. They sell triage kits, and he's like, and I love this scene because the whole time it's like, well, he's like it's a donut shop. It's basically a hospital. Wolverine's like, no. And he's like, they sell triage kits. No, they don't. Like, he's just like saying out loud what you, the audience, know, where he's just like, no, it won't. I'm going to get you across there. No, you're not. Like, just that sort of thing of like, Hugh Jackman's like, nope, no.
Voice of reason.
Yeah, just and then, it's not going to work.
Probably the funniest thing Wolverine does in the movie is for him to get across, he just picks up Dogpool because he knows the Deadpools won't shoot him. And he just slowly walks across the street, staring them down, holding this little puppy.
I love Beautiful. This because it shows that all the Deadpools love Dogpool, but also that all the Deadpools hate Nice Pool because they totally shot at him.
They had no problem shooting him.
They had no problem shooting Nice Pool to the point that his head literally explodes. But with Dogpool, they were all like, stop!
Yeah, that's a good point. So then we get this fight, and dude, moments before this fight, I'm thinking to myself, it's very cool we finally got Hugh Jackman in the costume. It's great. It's kind of weird they didn't go all the way and do the mask. Like, there's been no shots of the mask. I was like, is it a hood? And then he walks up, he pulls up the hood, which that thing was not hanging behind his back the whole movie. They're you know what they're doing. Movie but magic. He pulls it over his head, and we get a masked Wolverine and Deadpool fighting through these 100 Deadpools. This is just nerd porn. It's all and it is.
Literally
I'm
like
not complaining.
It's like one slow tracking shot from like the moment they run out until they crash through the back of the bus, and like the whole time
it's like
this is
the
so cool
prison hallway fight from Watchmen, except it makes sense here. this is to have like a badass fight scene versus, we talked about Watchmen. But this one long tracking shot. And I love that shot where like the Deadpool army overwhelms them and pushes them off screen. And then Deadpool limbs just start flying onto the screen and they push them back
on the screen. Yeah.
Oh, so good. They go through the bus. Like I watched it. I made it a point to like follow Wolverine throughout the fight, and I want to see the movie again. I want to follow Deadpool and watch all of his kills throughout. Andrew, I gotta ask though, what do you think of this mask? What do you think of live action masked Wolverine?
I thought it was cool, but I understand why they haven't done it.
Yes.
That's how I'm gonna put it. It was cool. He wears it essentially the rest of the movie, all the rest of the climax, the actions. He wears it, and I think it's cool. My stance basically is I'm like, I can see why they may not have used this before. It doesn't.
Some things translate better than others.
Necessarily translate. The Deadpool thing works pretty well, but the Wolverine thing too, like it's a static thing, and like I'm not gonna bag it though. It was cool to finally see it.
Sure.
Obviously you wanted to see it the whole time. I love later when like his shirt rips apart, but the mask stays on for some fucking reason. But I do want to shout out some of the cameos in the Deadpool Corps. Because the minute Lady Pool shows up, Lady Deadpool, I was like, I bet that's Blake Lively. And it is.
It is.
Now, none of these people take their masks off. These are all just voiceover cameos, and they are. But also, it's dog actor Peggy as Mary Poppins. Sorry, Dogpool's name is Mary Poppins, which is also adorable. But she was apparently voted Britain's ugliest dog. And that just felt so mean to me. I was like, look at this beautiful. My reaction to Dogpool was basically Deadpool's reaction. I thought it was the most adorable thing in the world. I was like, I want to take this dog home, and I want it to be my dog.
You let it kiss you on the mouth?
Absolutely. Not even a question. So we get Blake Lively doing the voice of Lady Deadpool. Reynolds and Lively's kids, Inez and Olin, do Kidpool and Babypool. We got my boy Nathan Fillion showing up briefly as the voice of Headpool, who's literally just the Deadpool skull with the propeller hat on that just flies around the whole time. Matthew McConaughey as Cowboy Pool, putting on such a thick Southern accent, I almost didn't know it was him.
Like I didn't recognize. I read it afterwards. Like, well, that makes sense, but he didn't just be Matthew McConaughey. He pitted a performance on
Yeah,
me.
like I genuinely because I saw it and then I was like looking at the credits between viewings and I saw that he was Cowboy Pool and I was like, oh, and then when I saw it the second time, I heard it and I was like, oh, it is. But I'm like, but he's literally almost parodying himself so hard.
Yeah.
You can't tell it's him. Like, it's so weird. And there's a lot of other, there's just a bunch of, cameos there, like one of the Wrexham AFC players, which is the football club he runs with Rob from Always Sunny. He's there as Welsh Pool, who's just the Deadpool with the Welsh flag on his chest. Ryan Reynolds' stunt double apparently plays Canada Pool. And then there's a whole bunch of different Deadpools in there. Like there's a Samurai Deadpool, there's Deadpool from the 2099 universe. They've got the Golden Age Deadpool, who was a later thing. There was not actually a Golden Age Deadpool. Zenpool, a pirate version. They pack them in here, the references, and this is why like a guy named Victor Gischler gets credited in the credits with a special thanks because he's one of the guys that kind of came up with the idea of the Deadpool Corps back when like Deadpool Comics Mania was at like its big height in like the late aughts. The Deadpool was like a big thing, but I thought just packing all those in, I thought it was super fun, just having fun with the way all of them look. And this tracking shot too is just super cool. Like the fact that it like goes onto the bus and they just storm through the bus, I was like, this is just a blast. This is just so cool.
Dude, the shot of them jumping out the back where it's like freeze frame comic book cover, like their action poses in the air. Like I think Hugh Jackman, I don't know if he can actually bend the way that he's flying through there, but it's so cool. I mean, they are just, again, I'll use this term fan service and like unashamed, unabashed fan service, and I'm not complaining. But then they add the joke of Deadpool doesn't stick the landing, which is very funny. He just falls on his face. God, it's so cool.
We didn't really talk about this, but I do want to shout out, like, we didn't talk about who wrote and directed this movie at all. But
I was just too excited to jump into it. I was literally, I was like, these bonus episodes, do we do the same format or we just jump into, I don't know. So
I just want to shout out.
Who's
So
responsible for this?
Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick do come back and write this script with Ryan Reynolds. They do get additional help from a gentleman named Zeb Wells. Zeb Wells is a guy who writes comics, but also is a fairly prolific writer in various things. Where he's written, but he also wrote for the She-Hulk show. He was an uncredited co-writer on the Marvels, apparently. He's the head writer on the upcoming Marvel Zombies show, so he's kind of entered into this kind of MCU era, but he did a bunch of voices on Robot Chicken. He's the creator of a show called Super Mansion, so he kind of came in here as well. And then Sean Levy also has a credit because Sean Levy is our director. And the reason I thought about this was talking about that tracking shot, because I like Sean Levy just fine. He's directed a variety of different movies. Probably most recently noted Free Guy, which was a Ryan Reynolds film, and that's also did The Atom Project, which is another Ryan Reynolds movie that came out a couple years ago. So that's kind of how he entered into kind of Ryan Reynolds' orbit. He's a producer on a whole bunch of stuff. He also did some directing on Stranger Things, and also he's directed tons of stuff. Real Steel, another noted thing for working with Hugh Jackman. But mostly, I've always kind of viewed him, and even after this movie, I don't necessarily not view him like this, but he's always just kind of been like a steady hand. Like, you know, kind of like a Martin Campbell, where like he's a guy that can come in, solid hands, going to guide your movie through to completion. But on this movie, with stuff like this, I'm like, there's genuine, like, choices and decisions being made visually that are standing out to me in a way that nothing he's really done is done before. And this bus scene, or this fight scene in particular, I thought was a real big standout of just like, man, this is awesome. Like, this is really well done.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I was a little nervous because like the series starts off with Tim Miller, leaves over to creative differences. I don't remember who directs Deadpool 2, but
David Leitch.
I feel like by the time
John
we get
Wick.
to Sean Levy, it's like Ryan Reynolds kind of bringing in his guy, and it's like, I don't know, we're taking too much creative choices away from directors. I don't know. I was a little worried about it, but I'm agreeing with what you're saying. The end product was I mean, it speaks.
Well, that's kind of why. That's also why I kind of bring it up, because, like, you know, Tim Miller had a very specific vision for that. Obviously, Tim Miller was a special effects guy that did stuff like the intro to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and then David Leitch, who did Deadpool 2, was one of the guys who was behind John Wick. He was a stunt coordinator, and has a whole big career that's come out now that he started. So let me phrase that. He co-directs John Wick, but Chad Stileski's the only one who gets credited for it. But then he directs Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, does Hobbs and Shaw, does Bullet Train, and then did Fall Guy this year, which I loved Fall Guy. Fall Guy was one of my favorite movies of this year. So he's like a stunt coordinator who's kind of moved into directing, and so that kind of made sense for, you know, the first guy was an effects guy that kind of came into directing. This was this. So with Sean Levy, it felt like the first instance was kind of like, oh, we're going with a different choice. And I was curious if the action was going to potentially get hurt because of that. But it didn't.
Dude, how about that kill in the beginning where Deadpool just bounces his sword on the ground and it goes through that guy's mouth?
So cool.
That was so cool. All right, I want to talk about the finale, but first, we haven't talked about the plot of this movie at all, which I think is fitting because, like, that's not the thing you walk away hyped about. It is really just an excuse to have all this stuff happen.
Yep.
And personally, I don't mind because I had a blast. Reviews for this movie seem to be pretty good. It's positive on Rotten Tomatoes. Metacritic looks to be hurt a little bit more.
Cinema scores A, so it's doing just fine.
Yeah. If you have, I mean, look, here's the plot of this movie. Like, his universe lost an anchor being in Logan, which I think this is the first we ever hear about that. And once that person dies, your universe slowly fades out of existence over thousands of years, and the TVA is supposed to watch that happen, but they have a rogue TVA guy in charge of theirs that wants to just end it immediately to not waste his time, so he's building a machine that ends timelines. But first they pull Deadpool out of the timeline because people upstairs think he's worth saving. They explain to him they're going to kill his universe, so he goes off on a mission to try to save his universe. by restoring the anchor being, but you can't just pull a different anchor being out. So they get sent to the void as punishment. They got to fight their way back up and stop this guy. Like, that's, I don't know, man. It's it's just nonsense. Who cares? It's just I mean, I think, Deadpool says, what in the MacGuffin is this, when he first sees the Time Ripper
That's all Time
machine.
Ripper is. It's a MacGuffin.
Yeah. It's just, it's kind of commentary about the Foxverse. That's the timeline that's getting erased, and we're just going to have a good time with it before it's gone. It's whatever. Some of the beginning scenes, after your favorite scene with all the kills, then it jumps to, like, Deadpool and Vanessa are broken up, and this part, I feel like maybe I should have rewatched Deadpool 2, because I felt a little lost through some of this stuff. I didn't really remember where he stood with a lot of these people. But at any rate, we get to the end of this movie, which is what I want to talk about, where they have to stop the Time Ripper. The only way to do that is with self-sacrifice. So Logan says, well, you're saving your universe. You've got something to live for. Let me have this. And Logan's going to sacrifice himself. It's completing this character's arc. And they play it totally straight. And again, kudos for this. Deadpool says, right before Logan walks into the room, I waited for this team up for a long time. And I think you're the best, Wolverine. And it lands, and it works, and it's impactful. And that line means so much, because throughout this movie, he's been referred to as the worst Logan for what he did to his universe. But throughout this movie, he's calling him, because of the action, he's calling him the best Wolverine. And it's also obviously talking about Hugh Jackman. And it's just, it works on these different levels, but it's played totally serious. It's great. And then Deadpool jumps in and locks himself in to sacrifice himself instead, which is also completing his arc. It ends up with both of them doing the self-sacrifice, but because it's both of them, it doesn't kill him. If it was one of them, it would have killed him. Since it's both of them, it doesn't kill him. Sure. I don't know. This is all technology that was just made up for this movie alone.
Folks, they were never going to die. If you thought they were going to die, they were never going to die.
I mean, I would not have been surprised if Logan died, I'll be honest. I would not have been surprised.
I do want to point out that during the whole bus fight montage sequence there and here, Like a Prayer is playing, and that song slaps really hard, including the wicked bass line by a gentleman named Guy Pratt, who used to play with Pink Floyd after Roger Waters left. It just works so well. It's one of those things that just jumps out.
This is probably not a new revelation for most people, but I heard that song maybe 3 years ago, and I listened to it.
For the first time?
No, not for the first time. But for the first time, I realized, like, oh, this is about a blowjob.
It's about a lot of things.
I think it's pretty explicitly about fellatio. But carry on, Andrew. What were you going to say?
Well, I'm not going to say it now because you just made it all weird. But,
I'm down on my knees. I want to take you there.
I've heard worse.
In the midnight hour, I can feel your power. Come on, how else are you going to interpret these things, Andrew? This is all you're going to hear of this movement forward.
Words do only have one meaning. That is true.
It's called a double entendre, Andrew.
Yes, the joke was words clearly have more than one meaning, Chris.
Okay. All right.
Way to ruin my moment. Anyway,
sorry, the song slaps. I agree. It can be about blowjobs and slap. It's not mutually exclusive.
It is true, I suppose. Anyway, this is I do love the moment where they break, because it's originally Wolverine's going to sacrifice himself so that he's no longer the worst Wolverine, so that he has like a noble sacrifice to save a whole universe. But then Deadpool sneaks in and says, "No, I'm going to do it because I want to matter, and this means I'm going to matter because I'll save this whole universe." And they both decide that no, we are Groot, and they do it together. And I love that, like, the moment Wolverine comes in, he sticks his claws into the thing, and they complete the circuit. I love that just his shirt immediately flies. Just the shirt. Yeah. Just the shirt flies off. The mask is still there. The pants are still there. And I'm going to say it. Hugh Jackman got ripped for this.
Insane.
Like, probably this scene alone is where he got insanely jacked, because this was where he needed to be insanely jacked. But, like, it even, like, literally shows Deadpool, like, leaning back and looking at the abs. And I was just like, yeah, it's fair. It works, and then like they, of course, obviously they survive, but then they walk out, and Deadpool's like, "Put a jacket on you," like, because even the women outside with the TVA are just looking at Jackman like, "Woof," and I'm like, "Yeah, I get it. That dude is 51 years old, and my God, it is nuts." Because like, and I will say that, oh, he's 55 rather. Jesus Christ, he's 55. My God. But you think about it, X-Men was 24 years ago, which means he was 31. Dear God, I will never be a man.
And he's way more jacked and shredded than he was in that first movie. It's insane.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. Because like in that first one, he's definitely like built. But in this one, he's like shredded. There was a funny video there's this web series they do where they have like, you're on a table and you have a glass of water and it's like agree, strongly disagree, or it's like agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and they ask both people questions and they move the water glass wherever they go. And the question was, Daniel Radcliffe could play Wolverine, or the question was, Daniel Radcliffe can play Wolverine, but Hugh Jackman can't play Harry Potter. And they just start hypothetically talking about Hugh Jackman playing a 12-year-old schoolboy as a jacked, ripped 55-year-old Australian man. And I'm like, hey, I'm not saying it would work. I'm just saying I'd probably watch that.
Be a good Funny or Die video for sure. And that's Deadpool. I think we've hit this. I mean, I don't know. I love this movie. I had a blast. That's all I can say.
I do want to shout out. We didn't even mention Jon Favreau shows up here as Happy Hogan too. Like literally in one of the first scenes.
It takes a while for them to show who he's talking to. I thought it was going to be Kevin Feige. I thought he's going to be having an interview with Kevin Feige.
I thought that would have been pretty funny too.
Yeah.
Well, and he mentions the man, and then I remember there's like, oh, this is before Stark dies. Like this is before Stark dies, so he's technically still there. But yeah, I thought that would have been there. There are a lot of very self-aware jokes, like he's like he turns back to Logan at one point early on, and he's like, "Welcome to the MCU, buddy. You're coming in at a bit of a low point." And
there's a lot of MCU jokes because he says a joke about, oh, it's been smooth sailing since Endgame. Like it's been
because at one point he's like, let's just end this, and they're all like, well, we can't. He's like, no, like the whole multiverse thing, it's not working. Like they call it out specifically, and then it's
Wizard of Oz did it the best,
and then it's Nicepool who's just like, look, I think it's been smooth sailing since Endgame, because of course he's not going to talk bad about anything. He can't do it. But there's a lot of jokes at Marvel's expense. All the cocaine jokes, where it's like, Feige said cocaine was the one thing that was off limits. He's like, do you want to build a snowman? Yes, but I can't. Like, just like runs off. Like a lot of jokes that it's the MCU and there's certain things they can't do, and then they do them anyway. And I just thought it was a blast. I thought that they had, clearly there's a lot of just fun being had with this movie. It still manages to have the emotional beats. It still manages to have everything else. I just think it's a blast. And there is a weird little potential tease for the future buried in this movie a couple of times, where we see a sequence of Thor holding a crying Deadpool while Thor also cries.
Do you think that's a tease?
I don't know. I don't think it's not a tease.
It's just footage from Thor: The Dark World, but they spliced in Deadpool instead of Loki.
Literally, the first shot of Deadpool's face in that, I thought it was Michael Fassbender. I don't know why. I thought I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, why is Chris Hemsworth holding Michael Fassbender? But they call attention to why was Thor crying a couple of times, and so I wouldn't.
There's also
Secret shocked.
Wars. There's like a Secret Wars comic, which we know is happening. So
there's Avengers 5 and 6, and I will say this. I said that Hugh Jackman would get to the MCU, and you didn't believe me. And
I guess technically he has, right?
He has. He absolutely has. But I think Secret Wars is gonna have. I don't know if all the people that were here will be in Secret Wars. I do not think we've seen the last of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine
until he's 90. What the movie says multiple times. I think it's interesting. The movie doesn't end where I thought it would. It ends with technically the Foxverse being preserved, and that's where Deadpool is. I thought he would be firmly in. What did they call it? 616.
Yeah. The sacred timeline is 616,
which is weird because it's also the comic books. So I don't like that they did that, but yeah, I thought he would end.
You're not alone. You are not alone with people being upset about that.
Okay, but at the same time, this is kind of where Deadpool makes sense. On the sidelines, commenting about the main action. He doesn't make sense being in the thick of it. He's not going to be an Avenger. He makes sense on the peripheral, and the big dogs can hop in and out of his story versus the other way around. So I'm not too surprised.
I will say this. There has been a lot of... This is all hearsay. This is all nonsense rumors. So we heard the rumor, obviously, that the Russo brothers were coming back to direct Avengers 5 and 6, which they're really good at wrangling those large casts. They've done that even back when they were working on things like Community and Arrested Development, which is a weird thing to think about, because, like, obviously when you think about an Avengers movie, you're like, oh, you want somebody that's, like, adept with, like, big budget effects and big stuff. And I'm like, well, actually, you might want somebody whose maybe their strength is making something that has a large group of people. Yeah. Because these movies have that. Because the effects, I'm not saying it doesn't take talent to do it, but you can get a lot of help with that part of it. Keeping everybody in line, that can be a really difficult thing. And the other rumor, obviously, or other the kind of big elephant in the room, and maybe San Diego Comic-Con is going on as we speak. We may get some more, because they haven't officially announced the Russo brothers are directing those yet. So this may be the weekend where they officially announce what Avengers 5 and 6 are going to be directed and be called. So obviously the Kang of it all is kind of the big question. People don't really know if they're going to pick up with that. Obviously the TVA and the timelines and the multiverse is still a thing here. Now, what I will say before I get to where I'm going is that I did expect this to potentially be a little bit more overt in where we're going, but it is largely standalone.
Yeah.
Outside, the TVA is not a standalone. You need to know what the TVA is to understand it. But this is a pretty self-contained adventure. The only thing it really leaves off is with the hint that Logan is now this new Logan is in the Foxverse. Now, also, you mentioned this. X-23 is in that final scene, too. So, she clearly survived.
No, she doesn't survive. He talks to the TV agent at the end.
Well, yeah, they pull him out.
Yeah. I forgot about that. You're right.
If she's in the timeline, that means she survived.
I don't know what the TVA did to bring her back.
But, and then I guess the implication is maybe that the others also got put back to where they belong, meaning that they are also potentially available to be paid a decent amount of money to show up again. But I expected there to be kind of a more overt kind of multiverse tease of some kind, and there's largely not. But obviously the biggest key obviously is that Deadpool and the TVA knows who Deadpool and Wolverine are, and I guess sees them as assets. So it may be that they are not quite... I do not... Absolutely 100% we will see Deadpool and Wolverine again. Dare I say, probably together again. But I thought... So with all of this talking about... Obviously, we still have the multiverse going on. Obviously, the question about Kang, and are they going to keep going with Kang? Are they going to recast Kang? Are they going to redo it? The whole big reveal that they've specifically stopped calling Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty... There was a rumor that started percolating that Avengers 5, I heard Avengers versus X-Men. Now, what that means and how that looks, I have no idea. I don't know if that's literally MCU versus Foxverse. I don't know if that's literally, we're finally going to get comic-accurate X-Men of everybody from the Foxverse versus the Avengers. That feels weird to me, given that all the prominent Avengers you'd probably want to see fight the X-Men aren't there.
Yeah.
So it's weird to potentially switch to that, but my theory now is that Secret Wars, rather than being Kang's alternate timeline, may just be a more accurate adaptation of the original Secret Wars, and the Beyonder is behind that with Battleworld and everything. But long story short, we've not seen the last of Deadpool and Wolverine.
I think you're right, Andrew. All right, I want to talk about this. Like I said, at some point in this movie, after Blade showed up, I'm like, there's no rules. I started thinking about who I would want to see appear. Yes. And it didn't happen. And I'm not complaining. It'd be so stupid to complain about what we didn't get in this movie after they gave us so much. But God, just thinking about characters that I want to see, or actors I want to see as that character one more time, Anya Taylor-Joy from The New Mutants came to mind. Yeah. And I was like, I told a friend of the show, my wife, I'm like, all right, anything can happen. If Anya Taylor-Joy shows up, that would be the coolest thing, because we covered that show, that movie on our podcast. I think I like it more than most people, but Anya Taylor-Joy specifically as man, what's her character's name?
Magic.
With the Magic, thank you. Would have been very cool, but anything feels possible moving forward too. I don't know. This was I mean, in the pantheon of like recent MCU.
She's also the sister of Colossus. Like, you've literally got that going for you. Like, Deadpool hangs out with Colossus.
Also, isn't it funny that I totally forgot about that. Isn't it funny that well, I think it's funny that Deadpool's Colossus is just always in his metal form. I don't know
always
why
Colossus.
That's just funny to me that he never changes. Yeah, man, this was a blast. I don't know. I hard to imagine not having a blast seeing this in theaters.
I've seen the hot takes. Like, I follow them around. People, like I said, doing the whole like, oh, it's just references. It's just this. Like, there's nothing to it beyond that. And I was like, look, man, if you're gonna say that a movie is fan service with nothing beyond it, a superhero movie no less, there's probably one that you really, really like that's exactly the same. But we're not ready to talk about that yet, are we? There's so there's your classic hemming and hawing, but I feel like most people are watching this and having a really good time. I think this is gonna clean up at the box office. I think this is gonna make a ton of money. I think I won't necessarily say the entire future of the MCU was riding on this film, but it definitely needed it to be a hit. Yeah. And I think this movie's gonna be a decided hit.
Yeah, I hope the surprises are preserved for everybody. And I had a blast.
You got to be careful though. Like, Entertainment Weekly already, like, outright on their Facebook page spoiled the Blade reveal. I was like,
man,
whoa! Like, that's like arguably the biggest one to me, simply because like there's nobody ever would have expected that. But like, yeah, they're just out there, just being like, yeah, and I'm like, man, could you guys not be?
Remember
dicks?
when Endgame came out and everyone like collectively agreed to give it like a week, like everyone like or the weekend.
Well, the fans did, sure, but this is a different group. I will say this: one time I got spoiled, and I'm still not happy about it. I had the post credits of Avengers spoiled for me, that it was Thanos. Sorry, spoiler, 12-year-old spoiler at this point. I had a friend just casually be like, dude, he like posted a link on my wall that basically like had a picture of Thanos and was like, I was like, dude, why did you do that? And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I'm going to watch it. Why did you spoil who's in it? And he literally immediately was like, well, he like tried to backtrack immediately that he didn't actually just do a really dickish thing. And I was like, I hate you. I no longer talk to this man for unrelated reasons.
Movie was a blast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled episodes soon. We'll see you next time. And remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.